we use solo time through this program. I mean, it might seem kind of obvious, but it's a very different thing. Well, it's not entirely different, but we're used to operating when we're relating, like with humans, in quite a different way to when we relate with nature. And a lot of like the things that maybe stop us from being totally like open and available to connect are to do with like social reasons. So when we have other humans around us, sometimes we're a little bit more like self-conscious of like talking to a tree or a leaf, for example, which, you know, like Shirley said, I got your name right. Cheryl, close. I thought I'd give it a go. Like Cheryl said, you know, it's kind of like almost like a natural instinct when you're a child that, you know, you just go out and talk to things. But as we get socialized, we kind of get told that that sort of thing is crazy or silly, and then we don't do it. So it's lovely having solo time so that we have our own space with nature that gives us the ability to just interact in a very natural way and not be so self-conscious, and also just not distracted, so that we can be really present with nature. We also try to have just one solo spot. So it's not just solo in terms of go out and be alone, but find a spot that is the spot for you to come back to over and over and over again. Because if we go somewhere new all the time, there's new things to be distracted by. If you stay in one spot, you might, you know, turn up for your third solo and kind of go, oh, this is boring now. But whenever you feel bored, that's a sign that there's the opportunity to go a little bit deeper. So my teacher always says, boredom heralds the arrival of the teacher. So if you're finding yourself thinking, oh, I want to look for something new, just remember that there's always further that we can go. Connection's not like you're either connected or you're not. It's a very like multi-dimensional kind of concept. So try to bring your curiosity back to that same solo spot, even when you think you've seen or learnt whatever it is you needed to learn from that spot. Of course, if you find your spot now and then later in the day you suddenly either feel like that you're no longer welcome in that spot, or there's suddenly like you discover a big ant's nest or a viper. In that situation, more than sensible to find a different spot. So yeah, just use your common sense about it. But if it's possible, then go to the same spot all the time. Because sometimes when things are uncomfortable, it's not a bad thing. That really shows us, you know, what we need to learn. So don't just go for necessarily the easiest spot for you, but what feels right. And this is where, in the process of finding your solo spot, is where the partnering with nature starts to come into it. So a key thing about nature, and well, our approach, our view of nature in this program, is that nature is alive, and by that, like in and alive, able to communicate and have a dynamic relationship, two-way relationship with us. It's not just us going out and doing things with nature, taking things from nature, including just taking an experience. Nature's a partner in every single aspect of this process. And so from that view, we also treat nature as able to help direct us to where is the spot that we should go. And also able to then give us a yes or a no, like when we think we've found our spot, do we get permission for being in that place? So yeah, the work starts really now with this exercise. So to find your solo spot, you can think about taking either a yin approach or a yang approach, the yin being like a feminine receptive kind of approach, and the yang being more a masculine directive kind of approach. So what that would look like, if you're taking a very receptive approach, you might just even start from where you're sitting right now and ask or be curious about, where am I being drawn? So you're inviting nature to guide you right from the moment you start to get curious about where's your solo spot. So you might feel like maybe you stand at the steps and you feel like your body's kind of being pulled in one direction. So you can even just let your body be like a pendulum that's kind of giving you an indication, all right, well, I feel like I want to step out that way. So I go in that direction. And then you lose the feeling, so you would stop and then go, okay, now which way am I being drawn? So you move in accordance to just your inner guidance that's being tugged at by nature. You also could do it by standing there and keeping your eyes open and asking, where do I need to go? And you might suddenly see like a particular tree suddenly jumps out at you. Maybe you think like the leaf has just the branch has given a little wave at you. So you got to be playful. Hopefully you're getting this notion. Be playful and be curious, because if we're not like open in that kind of way, then it makes it very difficult. So you can purely just let nature guide you, or you can also take a more directive yang approach of kind of going, well, I think I want to be over that way. So you go out for a walk through the pineapples and you go, oh, I really like that tree. I really want to have my solo spot by that tree. And then you approach the tree and then you ask it permission. So you still don't get to like entirely choose yourself. And even if you take the yin approach, you still need to ask permission. So this counts either way. When you think you've got to the spot that you want to be or you're guided to be, you're then going to pause. You might like to, use a bit of that meditative kind of practice to really become sensitive internally so that you can feel the response. But then you're going to speak, and speaking out loud is often quite helpful. You're going to ask, is it okay for me to be here for my solo time over the next few days? And once you've spoken, you've placed your intention of that question into the field, you're then going to stop and listen for the response. So obviously that's not going to be like a spoken word, like the tree's not going to suddenly say yes or no. So the communication with nature is much more subtle. But once you start listening for it, you'll begin to start hearing it. So if it's a yes, you might suddenly feel like drawn towards it. It might feel like a sort of opening, like warming kind of sensation in your body. If it's a no, you might get the feeling like you're being pushed away, like a little bit of a closing, like it's not as energetically open to you as it was before you asked the question. Or it could feel a little bit cold. So if it's a no, don't take it personally. Just like us, sometimes we just want to be alone and we don't feel like having interaction at that point in time. And it just might be an indication that there's other things going on, things that we are not aware of, can't perceive. And it just means that it's time for us to move on and go to a different spot. So the other thing for your solo time is we need to buddy up. So no one gets lost. Doesn't mean you have to go together, but just keep an eye on each other so you roughly know like where they are. And then when we come back from finding your solo spot, you're going to tell your buddy and make sure that they know like exactly where that is. So you might need to go and take them out there so that they know where it is, just so someone's looking out for everybody. So let's have a little break now. Given there were no questions about finding your solo spot, so therefore I'm taking it that you'll be right to just go straight into finding it. So just refresh yourselves as you need, and then it's 11:20. So you'll probably have like an hour. Does everyone know what a kui is? A kui. So I'm going to like yell really loudly, kui. like that. But you need to pass it on. So this is how it works. This is the callback. This is part of the removing the self-conscious layers. So if you hear me go coo, then you need to, and this will be much louder, just for Isaac's sake with the headphones on. You need to turn around. So as in put your back to here so that you're projecting outwards, and then coo further on so that everybody hears it. And if you don't pass it on, you're running the risk that someone won't know that it's time to come back. So it's your job for everybody else's sake to pass it on. So after you've heard the cooey, passed it on, then come back in. Yeah. Did everyone find their solo spots?
Yeah.
Very good. How did you find the process of finding the spot? So this is the time for people to share. It's not mandatory for everyone to share every time, but if we go on and there's some people who never say anything, I may just pick you out. So you might as well just jump in when you're inspired to. So how was it?
The last partnering with nature, I did the yang approach. I was asking everybody, can I sit here? Can I sit here? Can I sit here? No. They finally, got one to say yes. But this time I wanted to be a bit more receptive. So I went about it the yin approach. So which direction called on to me, then I wouldn't question it. And I would just, head to that direction. And it led me to this one tree. It was not too far away from, actually it's very, very close by, in the midst of the pineapple field. So it's not deep in the forest, but I felt called to just sit there. I asked my permission, and then a leaf fell. So I was like, okay, cool. But then I got bored. Bosan. I was like, what do I do? Why am I not feeling a connection or something? Should I go deeper? And I felt like it was a no. So I was like, there was a time when I used to love going outdoors, and when I was a kid, I used to climb trees, right? So I looked at my tree, and I was like, I could climb you. And it was a yes. So I ended up climbing it. And what was weird was that when I was climbing it, it was there was two different personalities. One that was the playful kid who would just brave everything, I could make this jump, I could make this swing, I could get from this branch to this branch. It doesn't look possible, but just figure out the momentum along the way, just braving it, right? But then on the other side, there's this other voice that's you're gonna fall, be careful, you haven't done this in a long time. But whenever I made a move, it was muscle memory,
Dang.
Yeah, it was I used to do this, and my body just knew how to do it already, even though I had all these doubts. So I thought that was super interesting, and my experience was more play. I think I was asking, what is this? What would this partnering with nature be like for me? And I think I got my answer, which is play. Yeah. So that was pretty fun for me. Yeah.
Great. Cool. I was going to do that, got a section written up there, what would nature do, which is actually the next section in your workbook, some of which we will do after lunch. One of the principles that nature works by is everything needs to be in a flow. So that's how I like to run courses, is like things are going to change and move, because if you have too many hard barriers, it just chokes up the flow, and we don't want to do that. So yeah, schedule is flexible. But we'll get through some of this now. So obviously we're using the word nature like a lot, and you may have got the idea of what I'm trying to get out of you for this question. So loaded question. But what do you think nature is?
Mom.
Oh. What do you define as nature? Or alternatively, what is not nature?
The city.
Why is the city not nature?
Because it's not.
It's great. What features, qualities, origins of the city mean that it's not nature?
Asphalt, cement, buildings, stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
Urban development is not nature. But technically everything's nature because everything's made from nature. Blah, blah, blah. But it's not.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So then are we nature?
Yeah.
So if we're nature and we create things, does it mean that what we create is nature or not?
I don't like this question. What's next?
Does anyone else want to jump in? No, you're doing great. It's exactly the line of thinking that we need to go down. Anyone else?
I think life is what makes nature nature. Whatever form of life. So this is not nature because there's no life in it. And humanity, we create, but we create things that are dead and also kill nature or kill other life forms, including ourselves. So that can't be nature. We are nature. And we also create, like when we grow pineapples or palm oil plantations, they are nature, but a different form of nature. You know, it's created nature. And what we do, it's messed around quite a lot with nature. So altering the nature of things, Yeah. But we also alter in ways that kill, like urban, really, really dead urban environments, where we kill the water, for example.
I think that nature is alive is a really important point, which is getting into one thing that I try to bring people's attention to in this What Would Nature Do, is that the principles and the patterns of nature are, I think, important when we think about questions like this, like what is nature? So if something's alive, there's a lot of principles of living systems and qualities that they have, but including things like their self-healing, for example. So if something, it will self-organize and self-heal. So self-organization, I guess, and self-healing may be slightly different things, but it needs to have the ability to be creating of its own and organizing itself. And that comes down to this really fundamental pattern that is the main thing I'm trying to talk about here, is generativity. So life is always trying to create more life. So if you think about what a system's doing, what are the sort of archetypal patterns of a system, life is generative, meaning that it's always creating more and more and more. And that's what we see at biodiversity is a manifestation of this. It's because life is always moving to higher levels of complexity in this generative kind of way. And it's a complexity that has a particular quality, and that is that it's ordered. So even though it's chaos and order all at the same time, because there's these principles and patterns of creation and of life that are present in everything, including in us. And this is just my personal opinion, but it's helped me in sort of thinking about it, of how as human beings we're in this fairly unique situation where we of course are nature, but because of our ability of our mind to be in this duality where we see ourselves as separate, it also means that we have the agency or the ability to act not with the patterns of nature. So we can act in a way that kills things. So we can be degenerative as well as regenerative. And it's about how are we embodying those principles of life that determine whether we're acting as in alignment with nature or we're not. So there's a point in there, a question in there about what's the difference between sustainability and generativity. And I think it's sort of relevant to, most of our work, in that we used to use the word sustainable a lot, but if you really think about what sustainable is, it's like continuing the same, when really that's not what life or what nature does. Nature's trying to be generative, trying to get to more and more higher levels of ordered complexity. And that's where I think the more that we can embody those patterns, the more that we are contributing to a generative, sustainable future. And the nice thing is, we actually see those patterns in nature and we're like fine-tuned to respond to them. And how we know we're responding to them is that we recognize beauty. So there's something about when we see something as beautiful, and we're going to try this now, just look around you and just stop, rest your eyes on something that you notice that you find beautiful. And ask yourself, what is it? Why do I find that beautiful? So there's another section in there called the three natures, and it's just to try to draw your attention to, I already mentioned it, but the fact that we're not just talking about outer nature, that you can't really, if you're talking about outer, what we think of normally as nature, you can't really do any real investigation into outer nature without it inherently involving inner nature, and then also true nature, this much broader, kind of transcendent quality that is nature and spirit all at the same time. So even though, that I know this little talk now about patterns of creation and beauty and truth, and these all feel like very lofty kind of concepts, but ultimately it gets to the very practical side as well, why I've called this section "What Would Nature Do?" is because it points to that there is this inherent wisdom in life. There is this intelligence in how nature orders itself and creates more life. And so we can be learning from that, which I think can happen in a cognitive way. We can look at, how would nature design, really good resilient buildings? And you see, the use of bamboo, and we can copy, and this is what the field of biomimicry does really well, is try to copy nature, mimic nature, because there's so much inherent intelligence in it in a very practical sense. But it becomes harder to grasp when we're talking about how do we apply those principles when it's not something physical. But I think, for example, the way that Cynthia has formed Forever Saba, there's a lot of wisdom that embodies the patterns of nature in that, the fact that you guys work in, small teams that relate a lot with each other, even though it has distinct functions, and there's, adaptability and constant relating with the purpose of these sessions to come together, learn together, and then go back out into what you're doing. All these are how nature works as well. And working with communities, like, you have to really form the relationship, and it's all about a two-way flow of communication. It's not just, some organization that knows what's right going in and telling someone what to do. It has to be, and there's feedback loops and information flow all the time. So yeah, this is why we want to partner with nature, because it just kind of inherently has a wisdom. That's my point. Yeah. And then I put a quote down the bottom, which I thought sort of encapsulates all of that. We learn to do what the student of nature learns, and that was to feel beauty. So to be a student of nature, we need to be able to not just observe with our cognitive mind, but really be able to feel nature at the same time. And I believe the process goes on when we're more and more connected with nature. Those patterns just become part of us, and so that we're more able to express those patterns, so that what we create has those patterns of nature included in them. So there's a mental looking at, thinking about, then reproducing part to it, but there's also an embodied feeling, bringing in, connecting, and then producing, creating from that deeper place that sometimes even just totally bypasses our cognitive mind, and that's fine.